On today's episode, we have Mark Beal. He's a 30-year marketing exec. He's also Rutgers University's assistant professor of practice, Gen Z author, thought leader, TEDx speaker, podcast host, and so much more. Join us as we dive into the multi-generational workforce. We debunk the laziness myth, and we discuss how to set yourself apart in the future of work. Don't miss this tactical episode with real true nuggets to help you elevate. Pepelwerk is proud to present Strategic Shift, a podcast dedicated to exploring the future of work. Thank you for joining us as we hear stories of bold decisions and workforce innovations. I'm Christy Honeycutt, and I'm your host. Mark, welcome to the show. I know that my intro did not do you justice because you have worked with some amazing brands like NASCAR and the US Open, and you work with thousands of students. Is there anything that you'd like to highlight about your background and what you do today?
No, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I love being here and I love the conversation with you. The biggest thing is, what I talk about is I had 30 plus years in public relations and marketing. As you said, many of these years were focused on major companies who were sponsoring events like the Super Bowl, the Olympic Games, the Rolling Stones. And they asked me and my agency to create campaigns around that. So that was my life for 30 years, 24/7. But now it's the idea of leveraging that for the benefit of students for today, for the next generation of marketers. So everything I do today as a professor at Rutgers University is to leverage all my experiences, all my contacts, which I try to leverage almost every day, and really help today's students and even my recent graduates get to where they want to get to. So that's the focus, that's the purpose, that's kind of my mission now. It's about giving back, paying it forward. But the way I'm doing it is really leveraging, my contacts, my network, and my experiences. And so that's kind of where I am in my life stage and my career stage now, which is a really great place to be because I feel like it's much more purposeful than just what I did for many years, which was, go out, win business, and then create campaigns around that, which I love, very exciting. But now I feel I have a higher purpose now.
Well, and you're so humble because how many books have you written? I counted over 10.
The number's right around 10. It's somewhere it's in the 10 range. And, I've always loved writing. I was a journalism major in college at Rutgers. I wrote for a daily newspaper while I was in university. So I've always loved writing. And so, 10 books, a handful of those books focus on Generation Z. Several of those books focus on career. And the first book I ever wrote, which was inspired by my students in, say, 2016, 2017, when I was only an adjunct, is titled 101 Lessons They Never Taught You in College. And it just felt right. It was the students after class every day. How do I write a resume? How do I write a cover letter? Do I send a thank you note after the interview? How do I conduct a phone interview versus an in-person? And so my thought was, let's turn all those questions into answers and let's create these very pithy 101, almost like one-page tips, advice, whatever you want to call it. And that book was well received, and so we just kept going with it.
I love that. Well, and it's tactical, too. I think look, I'm a mom of a 32-year-old university director, and so I've watched him go through college, and I've watched him help other people go through college. And at the end of the day, in this multi-generational workforce that we find ourselves in, we all communicate differently, and our expectations are so different. So I'm curious, obviously, about how you're engaging these different generations and if you're seeing any nuances with each of them, because I know that I personally have had I've worked with people that are 20 years older than me and 10 to 15 years younger than me at the same time, and communication styles are vastly different.
Well, first of all, I love that you brought up communication styles are different. I bring that up to my students all the time. And what I say is in that first 30, 60, 90 days on the job, you really need to understand what are the communication styles and preferences of your supervisor, your manager, your client, because they're all going to be different, right? Some are going to be very into, we're just going to text each other all day, or we're going to be on Slack all day, or I'm an old schooler, so we're going to be on the phone all day. But either way, right, you got to figure out what they prefer. I was talking about a client I once had who just never responded to text, emails, or anything. And so the way we kind of solved that was we sat in their office and got work done. But I told my students, everyone is different. Everyone has a different, two things, as you said, a style, a preference, and what I call is response time. So I'm a like a 30, 60 second responder. You send me an email, and if I'm not flying or driving or teaching, you will get a response within a minute. I do that for me because I have hundreds of emails that pop build up all day. And if I don't respond right away, it's going to get buried somewhere. So that's my method to my madness. But others I know who I'll email, and I know I've known them well. I know that in 48 hours they will respond, but that's their response time, 48 hours. Others I know that they won't respond to my first email, so I give it 5 days. Then as soon as I send the second, they'll say, I'm so sorry, I saw your first one, I'm responding. So, but your point, it's so important, especially for young professionals, to understand that and understand those key individuals they're working with. Again, a supervisor, a manager, a director, a client, because those are the individuals they're communicating with day in and day out, and they have to understand preferences, timing, and things like that. So I love that. For me, I have this incredible opportunity that I'm privileged to have, which is collaborating with this semester 150, mostly Gen Z students in the classroom. I also teach some graduate students who maybe some young millennials there. But so I'm kind of in I'm in the classroom with them on a almost near daily basis. So we get to know each other really well. We get to understand, as you said, kind of our styles, our preferences, and how we communicate. And yeah, it varies from generation to generation and generation. I laughed a little bit when you said that, because I'm currently planning for a keynote speech to it's either 50 or 100 CEOs in a few weeks. And the organizer of the event is probably a Gen Xer like me. And so he doesn't email, he doesn't text. He just calls my cell phone whenever he needs something, which is what our generation would probably do. Where if I was doing that same event with someone who might be a Gen Zer or young millennial, for them it'd be probably a text. Hey, I need this, get me this, or whatever. So very important. You're absolutely, Christy, you're right.
I love the text to ask if you can text.
Yeah.
Yes. Legit, that's happening nowadays. So you've got all of these different generations and how they communicate and how they want things to go. And then we're in the cusp of innovation and technology and AI. And all the things that's out there with each of these generations. Are you seeing that your Gen Zs and your millennials are challenging the future of work? Are they seeing kind of the process different than maybe the Gen Xers and the boomers did?
I think so, for sure. And so I have these two pillars that I talk about whenever I speak about the multi-generational workplace. And I always point at myself when I talk about older generation, because I always want to, when I talk about Gen Xers, I'm talking about myself. So there's two pillars. First is older generations, again, me. We live to work. We live to wake up and go work 5, 6, 7 days a week. I'm not proud of that, but it's the truth. We live to work. We wake up to work 15, 16, 17 hours a day. Gen Z doesn't do that. Gen Z works to live. They work to earn a salary, to then use that salary to pursue passions, to pursue interests, to pursue even side hustles, which in today's world, they should be doing. But in my day, you wouldn't even discuss a side hustle. So that's the first thing. Live to work versus work to live. And then the second part is, I think it speaks to your point. I'm putting a finger when I say this, not anybody else. But I think we worked harder, but not smarter. Gen Z works smarter, not harder. And so to your point, they're leveraging the latest technology, the latest AI platforms, whatever it might mean. They'll take a task that maybe is very time-consuming task at 9, 10, 11 hours and say, well, why don't we try this? Is there an AI platform that maybe this task can be done in 30 minutes? Someone like me who's been in it for so long isn't necessarily thinking that way. They're thinking that way. That's how they think. I mean, it comes natural to them to think, okay, well, maybe there's a process, a platform, a channel, a technology, whatever it is. We can actually be much more efficient. Then maybe we can focus on other things like strategizing and creativity and coming up with campaigns. So yeah, that's to me the change. I do repeatedly say this to my students in my classroom, and I teach mostly juniors, seniors, and grad students. But I say this probably every class, and they probably are tired of me saying it. But what I tell them is, I believe we're in chapter 1 of AI and business for sure, but I say AI and marketing because my focus is marketing. But we're going to be in chapter 2 real fast, and we're going to be in chapter 3 before we know it. And I tell them, I'm in a different part of my career now, but for you, as you start out, AI is going to be, you're going to be joined at the hip at AI for the next 30, 40, 50 years, whatever it is in your career. And so what I tell them, and I just told them this yesterday to a class of 90 students, I said, live it, learn it, immerse yourself in it, test it, learn it, try it, experiment with it. And I said, I wouldn't be shocked if when you have a job interview in 3, 4, 5, 6 months, if the person conducting the interview might say, oh, by the way, what do you think of AI, and have you tested it? Have you tried it? And what's your favorite AI platform? And if you don't have an answer for that and say, well, no, I really haven't, they're going to be like, nah, you're not right for us. So big believer in if you're starting your career, not just starting your career, but for my students, they're all starting their career soon, immerse yourself completely in AI. Every time I bring a guest speaker, and I bring in almost 60 a semester across all my courses, almost, maybe 50. And these are people who are leaders in marketing, advertising. Just yesterday, I had the leader of shopper marketing for Campbell's, the soup company. And I always ask, just talk about day-to-day, how are you using AI? And it's not to solve the world's problems at this point. It's really just to really kind of, I'll call it simple things. But I want the students to understand that these marketers, these advertisers, these public relations professionals, whether they're 25, 30, 35, 40, 50, 55, every single day, they're testing AI. They're trying AI to help them with something. And so the students who are probably more fluent in them than an old Gen Xer like me, they really need to be testing and learning and trying, because it's going to be such a big part of their career.
I mean, AI won't replace your job, but someone with AI knowledge will.
Yes, and also, you're going to go somewhere else there, but yes, I agree. Also, if you're again, immerse yourself in it. If you live it, you are going to, so to speak, advance much more quickly in your career than someone who puts their hands up like, I don't really like technology. I draw the parallel to 20 years ago when social media kind of showed up in 05, 06, 07. And there were two camps to me. There was one camp that said, oh, that's just a fad. That'll be gone in a year or two. But no, it's transformed everything we do. It's transformed marketing. It's transformed media. And those who said that, again, to me, became dinosaurs pretty quickly. And those who said, no, we need to embrace it. We need to understand it. We need to live it, learn it. I think they advanced very quickly. And I think the same with they.
Oh, for sure. There's so much technology and innovation out there that it just makes your head spin. And then when I look at, and I think we're both very passionate about the future of work and people finding meaningful purpose and employment, it's how do they choose and what do they need to know to do? Because each human in the United States gets 7 points of fraud a day, right? So they're navigating that. They're navigating all of these different ways to apply for a job, to be seen, someone with your background being within marketing for 30 years, I'm curious what your advice is to both employers and candidates. How do they set themselves apart in this age of AI and on the right foot, right? We don't want people to think, oh, they're just getting into the door. I've had so many recruiters and leaders say, we don't know if it's an AI written resume or not. So there's a lot of challenging, there's a lot of mistrust out there right now. What guidance do you have based on what you've seen and your background? Yeah.
So I have real core principles in this area that I think you'll like.
I'm sure I will.
And I do. And again, just as background, even though I'm a professor now, as part of my way of giving back every day, like when we get done here, I have 5 back-to-back Zoom calls with current or former students, helping them get their next job. That's just my way of giving back. So we're going to go through their resume. We're going to review it. We're going to revise it. We're going to then figure out where do you want to go and who do I know that can help you get there. And then I will start making introductions for them, which I actually already started this morning with one of my former students. So even though we talk AI and tech, and that's not going away, I already said that. I'm also a huge believer in what I call HI, human interaction. And HI is not going away either. And I do believe that in a job, competitive job search process, that, it may start with more tech-based programs. You may even do your first interview with something that's not even a human. You may just be recording an interview like this. But eventually, in round 2 or 3 or 4, there will be some human on the other side, whether you're doing it through Zoom, video conference, or in person. And I always tell my students, I just said this yesterday again, I say, I think that's the candidate that demonstrates the best AI, who can converse, who can engage, will be the candidate that I believe wins. Not because at that point in round 3 or 4, you've already made it because of your credentials. You've already made it through because of what was on your resume. Now they're comparing you to, say, 4, 5, 6 others. And at the end, they're going to say, I really enjoyed my conversation most with that person or that individual. And that's really what I talk about AI, is this engaging conversation. And so I think that's a huge component. So I'm going to back up 1 second. So to me, that's a big piece of the interview process and ultimately winning the job. But where at the beginning, where I am with my students and my former students is what I call kind of my 1-2 combination is we could all hit the send button and apply to jobs. Personally, I don't think we're going to get there. It's going to go into a black hole, and most likely your resume among the 1,000 is probably not going to get looked at, but no matter how well it's written or whatever. And even if the applicant tracking system kind of matches it well. So I always say we've got to do two things, and I've done this a lot in the last few months with a number of students and alums and companies. Once you apply, and I'm not saying come to me all the time, I don't mean it that way, but you need to identify who knows who there. So, I mean, I just in the last 3 weeks, I've done this and helped at least 10 or 12 people get their next job. So who knows who where? So you're applying to a job at XYZ company. Oh, I just happen to know someone at XYZ company. They might even be in that same department. It might even come under them. But if not, we need to get to them, and we need to get them to hand deliver, so to speak, your resume to the recruiter internally. And you know this better than anyone, Christy. We don't, as the candidate, ever really have access to the recruiter until they might call us one day and say, hey, we really liked your resume. We're going to put you through the process. But other than that, we don't know who it is. We don't really have access to them. We don't know how they're making the decision. But if we can use that contact and use that referral to at least just get us on the short list, just if you can just get me in there for that 10 or 15, I'll take it from there. And so that's my big focus with all my students. Like I said, this morning, I just set up one of my students with 3 different companies, 3 contacts at each, 1 contact at each of those companies. And the goal is for her to get her on the short list for a job. And so that to me is the biggest piece of this puzzle is who knows who where, and does someone in your network know someone fairly well, really well, that they can make a call on your behalf and just say, you know, this person applied, really strong candidate. I think it'd be well worth you putting them in the mix for that 5, 10, 15. So that's the approach I take. And it's, well, this summer, it's just worked week after week after week after week. I've had so many former students convert those kind of relationships into jobs by just opening that door just a bit. And as I always say, I never get anyone a job. They ultimately get the job. But if I can open the door just to get them in there, then it goes from maybe 1,000 to maybe 10. And if they at least we've just improved their chances dramatically by being 1 of 10 as opposed to 1 of 1,000.
I love that you mentioned that obviously tech is here. It's been here. It's going to continue to evolve. So we need to embrace it. But I also love that, like, almost equally important is the human component, right? It's that relationship. And so I think we're in a unique opportunity to really bring that forward, to really shine in your EI, your EQ, how you relate to people. And in my opinion, with my limited experience I've had with this population, mainly my children, that's the differentiator, is how they communicate and how they relate in unison with the technology, which I think you're bringing a great foot forward for everyone. Correct.
And I'm going to add here, and again, you know all this. When I say this, you already know this. But I'm going to add one thing, which you kind of talked about before we started is, and I didn't mention, but obviously another big element of this, especially when we get to that part of human talking to human, not just the engagement, but it's also research. And so big believer in, you know, if I was doing the interview today and you were hiring me, Christy, or you were doing the interview on your side and you were the recruiter, I would have all my sticky notes of all my research that I did over the last week. Company made this announcement 5 days ago. They just won this award for this, whatever it might be. The CEO just did a podcast and I pulled a quote out of that. Because now you're showing not only do you have pretty good HI, but you actually took time and did some research. I had a former student, only graduated in May 25, and I had a CEO with an agency who said, hey, I'm looking for really strong candidates. And I said, don't worry, I've got them. I'm going to send them your way. So anyway, this one English student, within 48 hours, she called back. I've got an interview already. I said, great. I said, and somehow, I don't know why, but I think the CEO, I'm not sure why the CEO was involved in making the interview, but somehow they were. So I said, here, we're going to do this. That CEO just did a podcast interview that was published like a week or 2 or 3 ago. You're going to go on, and I said her the link. I said, go to that podcast. It may be 40 minutes long. I'd listen to the whole thing, but even if you don't, pull one great soundbite out of it and put it on a sticky note. And as soon as you start the call before the interviewing starts, just say, thank you very much. Oh, by the way, I just listened to that podcast you did. I love when you said this. I'm telling you right now, if you do that, there won't even be an interview, because that person's going to be like, first of all, no one listened to that podcast. You're the only one who did. And you actually remember something I said. You will have won the interview in the first 10 seconds if you do that. And sure enough, she did win the job, and she loves where she did.
You know, Mark, that's awesome that you say that, because even before all of this AI, that's what the teams would share, the recruitment teams would share, is when you interview. I actually had a manager go, are you prepping these candidates? No, I'm helping them understand what they need to do to be successful, which is go research the company, come up with 3 questions that you can ask about them. Why is the seat vacant? Or, how do you see that I would be successful in the first 30, 60, 90 days? Just that, what's expected of me? What does good look like? Just be able to kind of put the employer on their toes a little bit to answer your questions and see that you're bought in and that you're worth the time. And you're right, it works every time because you build trust and you show that you have integrity and that you're prepared and all the things that an employer wants to see.
I like to add one more question. All the ones you asked are great. I love all those, and those are, and then the one I was asked, which I think is the one that kind of puts people, as you said, a little bit back on their heels, and then just say, what keeps you up at night as it relates to the company, the work, the clients? And I think they'll pause for a second, like, wow, I don't think everyone's going to ask me that. And then they may talk for the next 20 minutes because there's a lot keeping them up at night, but they've never had a chance to really open up about it. So that's another one on top, in addition to your questions.
Well, and that's a great one too for candidates to realize, is this a place I want to work? Right? Like when they start opening up the treasure chest, do I really want to work here? Or, wow, that sounds exciting. I can have an impact here. So it's really great. Well, I know
your point. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I love it. The last 2 weeks, I've been saying this over and over, which is exactly what you expressed. I said, yes, you're being interviewed for this job, whatever this job is, but you, very important, you need to interview them because ultimately there has to be a cultural fit. So if you get this job and you don't really have a sense of the culture, and let's just say it's a work hard culture, 5 days a week you're in the office, and you don't know all of that, and you're going to be miserable in about a week. But if you really understand the culture, you can say, well, maybe this isn't the right place for me. Maybe I should look elsewhere, whatever it might be. And so I completely agree with her. And I just say, you need to interview them as much as they're interviewing you, because this got to be a fit. And again, you know all this, Christy, but each of us has a different kind of culture where we can thrive. And some of us can really thrive in a work hard culture. We can. Some of us may not. And in today's world, which is completely has been disrupted by the pandemic of 2020. There's people who work 5 days a week from their living room. There's others who are going in 5 days a week. I've had a number of former students in the past week say, I have been 5 days out of the office. I don't want to go 5 days in, but actually I do want a little human connection. My preference would be, and I've heard this from a lot of people, I'd love to go in 2 days a week, 3 days a week. Maybe Monday, Friday, I don't go in, which is great, but I go in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And so that balance, there is that balance there, which all of us are trying to strive for. And part of that balance is the culture of that company. And does it match what I'm looking for in culture?
So, Mark, I have a question for you. You just brought something to mind. Obviously, we are a lot of different generations. You and I identify as X. Yeah. I know back in the day, boomers, and I've heard this before, there's some myths about Gen Z and millennials about them being lazy and do the different things. I tend to look at it differently, as I believe what I see is that they're more purposeful. They want more work-life balance, right? Where we were taught, or I was taught, that you stay with the same company for 30 years and then you retire. My grandfather retired from American, my dad retired from American, and that's what I looked for. But being in talent, I can tell you need to move a little bit to upskill yourself, right? Because you don't always get upskilling where you are. Correct. So I'm curious what your thought is, if you've heard any, myths about this population that you're interacting with on a daily basis, and if it is truly different than what they're expecting from maybe an older employer. Yeah,
I think, and again, as you mentioned, being Gen Xers, I think when I joined the workforce full time, and I hate to date myself, 1989, I'll bet you they were saying us Gen Xers are lazy.
We're lazy.
We don't want to work, and we don't want, So I think that's been kind of just historically when the newest kids, so to speak, join the workplace, and Gen Alpha will do this in 10 years from now, by the way. I think it's always been that kind of rhetoric of, they don't want to work as hard as we do. They're a little bit lazy. And I think it's been even more so because, and I talk about this perfect storm, really Gen Z entered the workplace as the pandemic hit in 2020. That was kind of our oldest Gen Zers, because the oldest Gen Zers were born in 97. 2020, they would have been 23. So we had two things really converging, transforming the workplace. This thing, the pandemic, which no one was prepared for, no one trained for, no one was ready for, and we went overnight from in-person work to remote. And then all of a sudden, this new group Gen Z is showing up. So they're showing up in a pandemic, which means they're not even in the office. They're remote. And so it was a whole turbulent kind of time. I hear it all the time. Lazy, doesn't want to, I hate to say it, I can't stand when I hear it. I just can't stand when I hear it because it's just talk. I think in every generation, I don't care what the generation is, Gen X, Boomers, Millennials, Gen Zers, if there's 100 of us, there's some, a number that are top performers. There's a number that maybe on the other side of the fence that aren't top performers. There's a lot in the middle, and I think that's the same for every single generation. I don't think it's a generational thing. I think it's a human thing, and they're just different levels of performance. Doesn't matter whether you're 29 or 59. I just think there's different levels of performance. So, but I do think, going back to what I said earlier, I do think though, and this is not my quote, I wish it was, but there was a great quote from the former CMO of MTV said Generation Z is the first generation that swiped before they wiped. And it's a fun quote, and it's a great quote.
Oh, wow. I love that.
With that, again, Gen Z is coming to the workplace with a lot of tech savviness, a lot of digital savviness. Mm-hmm. They're coming with, hey, have we tried Slack? Have we ever thought of Slack maybe to communicate among our groups or with our clients? And I'm just using it as an example, but the point is they are coming with that where, when I showed up, I didn't come with any of that. Well, first of all, there was no tech. In fact, when I started Name9, there wasn't even email, believe it or not. So they're coming with that and they're sharing that. So that's not about being lazy. That's just about, hey, is there a more efficient way to get things done? Is there a more effective way? And so that's a difference. But I bite my tongue when I hear from a fellow Xer or an older millennial who says, how do you deal with this generation? And I'm like, I don't even respond. I don't, because I don't want to get in an argument with them. I'm just like, don't worry. I spend lots of time with them. I know. And my proof points are all my former students, whether they graduated a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever, who are thriving now at major media companies, major agencies, pharmaceutical companies. Well, they must be doing something right because they're all doing pretty darn well over there, getting promoted. So,
and you lead me to another question for you. So I formerly managed a very large advertising agency, about three different agencies there, and the biggest challenge that the leadership wanted was to figure out upskilling. Now, I know what upskilling is. Upskilling is, I have this experience, I want to get to this experience. What's the gap between? It's fairly simple, but I've never seen anything so convoluted and confusing to a corporation and to the individuals trying to get to the next stage. So when you look at upskilling, and that's been a very overused term throughout the years, how would you recommend that your students, as they progress in their career, how do they upskill themselves?
Yeah, great question. And I agree with you. Scalability is tricky when it comes to upscaling. Whether you're with a company of 100 or 10,000 or even more, I don't think there's cookie cutter approaches, I think is what they're trying to take, right? So I always tell my students, and I think this speaks to what you're saying. So here's what I tell my students, okay, you just started a new job today. You're not going to be able to do it today. Sometime within the next 30 or 40, 50, 60 days, okay, who truly is your mentor, not necessarily your manager, but your manager / mentor / who's looking out for you on a day-to-day basis? They may not be your boss. They may be someone who was just 2 or 3 years ahead of you, and they're a colleague, but they're not necessarily your boss. And I think what you need to really do with that person, once you identify them, because you're not going to know who it is on day one, is try to sit with them and say, okay, what are measurable SMART goals that I can create with you that 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, we can keep checking. Am I progressing? Am I making it there? Am I getting there? And then continue to do that over and over and over and over, so that as you get to that 3-month mark, we go, you've hit these, you've got to work on these, but we need to start adding even more, because if we want to get to the next level, here's the responsibility. So anyway, I know that's very personalized and but I think to your point, it goes to the point of, I've got to take this in my hands. I can't just sit here and wait for the company to say, oh, there's a training program this Friday. Please show up at 12 noon for that. I've got to own this thing, and I've got to own my journey. And one way to own that is, again, ideally to me, it's someone who's like 2 to 3 years ahead of you in the same kind of role, but they've been promoted. They were where you were. So they've got a little bit of a success record, a track record, and they might be able to help you navigate that path, because they went from, I'm just making up a title that we use in agency, but they started out as a account coordinator, and now they're an account executive. All right, well, they're doing something right. So how do I get there? And one way to do that is to kind of partner with them. So instead of kind of forced mentorship. This is kind of organic mentorship.
And I love that you say that, the organic mentorship, because I've told all organizations I work with, if you want to build a coaching mentor program, I'm all for it. But you cannot drive an individual to want to have that.
Yes.
You need to, the ones that want it are going to get it with or without you, regardless, right?
Absolutely.
Such a great thing that you say. So I know that you work with a lot of CEOs and chief people officers, and on behalf of your students, is there anything that you're seeing or hearing from the C-suite that could help this population navigate to their next career?
Oh, it's a great question. It's funny. So I do have lots and lots of conversations with chief people officers on a regular basis, just because I'm trying to ultimately help my students. So I'm trying to pick the brain of the chief people officer. What are you looking for? What's whatever. And so that's where my relationship is today with them, is just picking their brain. What are you looking for in your next hires? And no, I mean, it's again, it comes down to a lot of things we talked about, right? They've got to, if they get into that mix, they've got to do their research. I tell my students, you probably studied for many exams. This is 10 times that. You've got to study like you've never studied before in your life, because this is your one shot at this one position. The second thing is, again, those HI, human interaction, people skills, right? If you come off robotic, it's just not going to fly. You've got to, again, the other thing I talk about, we do this in one of my courses, is you have a brand, just like Christy, you have a brand and I have a brand. Well, when you go compete for that job, your personal brand is competing with those other 10, 12, 15 other candidates. So one brand is going to kind of win this job. And so there's all these elements to even just your brand, well beyond just your past experience. Because again, I believe if you've made it to kind of round 3 or 4, you've made it because of your experience. Now you've got to do some other things, like, again, engaging them in conversation and show research and show commitment and all those things. So it's really interesting, the relationship, because I'll have a chief people officer. I had one in actually recently, which I really enjoyed this one, who said, we stopped posting new jobs. We don't post them publicly anymore based on labor rules and labor laws and some things. And so we just don't post jobs, but we're hiring a lot of people. And so if you've got great candidates, send them my way. And I love that she told me that. I didn't know that. But 2, when I send candidates, within minutes, she responds, thank you for this. Let's get on a Zoom call tomorrow. Like, that response rate. So not only does she proactively say, send me candidates, she actually acts on them as I email them. And she takes that first step of the chief people officer having the conversation. And I think based on that initial conversation, she's making a decision there. Maybe this person's right. Maybe they're not right. Maybe we have a spot for them. Maybe we don't. So it goes back to, again, just you've got to make connections with someone on the inside. You've got to understand what's the hiring process all about. I've had a lot of conversations lately with a lot of companies, mostly, good sized corporations, that are more using referral systems where, and I'll just use one category, for example, the sports betting industry right now, which there's, 4 or 5 big players. All my former students who work there, which I have dozens and dozens who work in that industry, they all say, if you've got someone good, don't have them apply to the job. I will apply. I will apply on their behalf. If they apply, they're on their own. If I apply for them, that's a referral. Most likely it's going to make its way in. And ultimately, there's a reason why this current employee is doing that. They may get a bonus, right? They may get a commission, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's interesting how some companies now have created these referral systems where they're really looking to the employee to actually refer someone, and even, in this case, apply for that person, like submit their resume as opposed to the candidate submitting. So it's all these nuances that you really have to know and learn. And the only way to do this is just ask a lot of questions, because every company operates differently, and the application interview process is different everywhere.
Well, and I think the innovation's on its ear right now with AI and people concerned about risk, or people that are completely leaning into it. At the end of the day, everyone's just trying to find really good people to employ to do a good job. So one final question for you, because and this one's going to be a little bit peppered. So I know that you're a university professor. I know that you are a deep executive. What about those employees and those future candidates that aren't college material? College was not for them, but they still have certain attributes that set them apart, and they want to continue and seek out employment. would your guidance to them be the same as it is for your college students?
Wow. I wasn't expecting that question. The way you started there, like, that's where you go, which is a hot topic. And I can't remember who recently interviewed me about this. I think it was Yahoo Finance. Said, is there value in a college education? And I was glad he emailed me that question because I really had a lot of time to think about it. and because there's great value. And one of the pieces of value, which this author did not even consider until I did the interview with him, it's all the value actually outside the classroom. So yes, you have your courses. Yes, and there's incredible value. As I said, I bring 50, 60 guest speakers in. Yesterday, like I said, I had one of the most senior marketing executives from Campbell Soup, and the students couldn't get enough of this. And where are they going to meet that individual? They're not going to meet him anywhere other than FLCO. But the networking, the connections, the relationships. I teach at a university, Rutgers University, which is a large university. And when I tell my students, there are tens of thousands of alums who work exactly where you want to work. You want to work in media? We've got tens of thousands of media. You want to work in healthcare? So if you don't go, we'll just say, to that university, well, there's no you're not creating any of those connections with it. So there's great. So the value of the university to me is, yes, the classroom, but it's all these things that come with it, which are part of the university experience over 4 years or more. So I think the way we can pivot down to someone who maybe is, again, you've got to figure out, okay, well, how do I build my my team of what I'll call mentors, my team of advisors, right? It's not going to be, if I don't go to college, well, it's not going to be classmates. It's not going to be professors. It's not going to be alums who I met who guest lectured in one of my classes. So I think there's that whole piece of it. And then the second piece, again, and you know this much better than I, so when I say the next thing, you're going to hopefully, you know better than I. But I don't know if there's been a shift. I'm just thinking, as my students apply for jobs, most of those jobs say require a bachelor's degree in something, communication, marketing, journalism, whatever, right? So I'm not saying every job does, but for most of those jobs that they're applying for, in fact, I think probably all the jobs they're applying for, that's at least like the first requirement. So what you need or what you must have. And that's like the first one. So if you don't have that, I don't even know if you get to round one with any of those jobs. It doesn't mean there aren't other jobs out there. Of course there are other jobs out there, right? So yeah, it's an interesting one. That's a really tricky one. I've had conversations with high school students who asked if they could speak to me, who were like content creators, which in today's world, we've got a whole generation of content creators. And they said, I don't think I want to go to college. I don't think I need to go to college. I think I can just I said, well, as a content creator, you're right. I mean, creating content, distributing content, and then trying to monetize that, you need to go at it on your own. I said, the only one little challenge, though, again, your network right now, as a senior in high school or someone just graduated, is very small. And it's not really going to get much bigger if you're not taking yourself someplace. And in this case, I mean college. So it's a little bit tricky because your network now is this group, and it may be the same group 5 years from now because you didn't really go anywhere. You didn't meet anybody, So great. Love the question. I wasn't expecting that question. I think it's fantastic.
Well, I'm glad that I stumped you. Maybe I should have taken Yahoo's note and sent it to you prior.
No, not at all. Not at all.
It just popped up. Well, Mark, it has been an immense pleasure getting to know you and interview you and understand kind of where you're coming with these students. Thank you for the work that you're doing to place them, because we need more Mark Beals in the world to help these guys land and be fulfilled and be a really good member of society. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we end the session?
I think just, what can I say? You got me there with that. I would just say, again, I'll point the finger at me, a Gen Xer, 30 plus years in the industry. I would just say, if you're in that position, pay it forward. Help those who are coming up behind you. Help that next generation. You've got everything they need that they don't have. And that's the one thing I say in the multi-generational workplace. Every generation brings value to the workplace. Older generations, a Gen Xer, well, something they have a lot of context. They have a lot of experience. They have a lot of lessons learned. They have a lot of successes. Gen Z has none of that, by the way. They don't have a lot of context. They don't have any experience, and they don't have a lot of lessons learned along the way. And so there's that. That's where that give and take can be of helping that next generation. So again, if you're a Gen Xer like me, pay it forward and help those out who are out there who really are seeking help. Such great guidance. I really appreciate it. Thanks again, Mark. Thank you, Christy. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Christy Honeycutt. Be sure to subscribe to Strategic Shift so you never miss an episode.
And tune in next time as we continue to explore innovation in the future of work.